And he said something really interesting. He said, "My religion is not polygamy. I typically say that I'm a Mormon." And I was curious, in the FLDS, did you guys call yourself Mormon?
So we didn't call ourselves Mormon, but we thought of ourselves as the true Mormons. Welcome back, everyone. My name is Sam.
And I'm Melissa.
I was raised in the FLDS community. It is a polygamous group run by Warren Jeffs, and I moved out when I was 18 years old.
I was raised LDS. Sam and I have been married for almost 10 years and have two awesome kiddos.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We want to quickly thank our donors and YouTube members and our patrons on Patreon. Thank you all so much for your support.
We are back reviewing more of Polygamy USA, which is following the Centennial Park group that's just right over the hill from where Sam grew up in Short Creek.
Yes.
And we are going over episode 4. And there were a couple interesting things in this episode that we wanted to bring up and kind of compare the way the FLDS handle it compared to Centennial Park. And I'd say the main storyline throughout this episode was really Hiram was one of the missionaries. He'd been a missionary for like 3 years and 8 months, which is super long. Like growing up mainstream LDS, missions are typically 2 years.
Right. Well, the mission for the Centennial Park group is a completely different ballgame. They're not leaving the community. They're just serving the community there.
But he still had to be released, though, which was interesting.
Yeah.
Because if it was purely just like a service group, then it would seem like you could always be one, or you could like stop whenever you wanted. But he did get called into the Brethren, which is the leadership of the church, and they released him from being a missionary.
Yes, it definitely had some strict rules. They were supposed to be clean shaven, which Hiram, I guess, was a little bit rebellious and was not. So
After more than 3 years.
Yeah, he finally said, "I'm done with this rule." But so there were some rules, and basically every day, all day, they spent in the service of the community, or Uncle Arthur, as they called him, who was in charge of the missionaries, would be similar to like a mission president in the mainstream LDS church. So there were definitely strict rules, and their whole life revolved around being on that mission, which is why they had to be released from it. So yeah, I mean, it definitely had some similarities, but they did stay in their community.
But still, 3 years and 8 months, I'd say, is a pretty long time. And then I thought it was interesting that when they released him, they didn't say what he was going to do next. So he didn't know, like, am I going to get married? Am I going to get put somewhere else? Am I going to be asked to work a different job? So I thought that was interesting. And he was just kind of waiting around to hear what the leaders were going to do with him.
Which, for him, a guy in the Centennial Park group is so different than in the FLDS, where the FLDS, as far as what comes after anything you're told, because your marriage is arranged and everything is, you just do what the prophet tells you to do always. So and then the mainstream LDS church, you get to decide for yourself. You know, if you go out and you date people, you try to find the person you want to marry. And then Centennial Park group was different than both of those in the sense that you had to just wait as a man. You had to just wait and hope for the day that the leaders call you and say, "Hey, a girl finally had a revelation or was inspired that you are supposed to be her husband."
Yes, and in this case, luckily for him, because he did really want to get married very badly, there was a girl who was inspired. And it was interesting to hear her thoughts as well, that like she had his name for like quite a few years at this point. But in Centennial Park, they wait until the girls are 18 before they are allowed to get married. And so she had kept pondering and praying about it and decided, you know, now that she was 18, that she wanted to submit that name to the priesthood. The next thing that was interesting, because they're not allowed to date before that, though. So she got the inspiration. He was told, "You're going to get married." And then they get to like kind of date for 2 weeks. More like just get to know each other so it's not so awkward, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, how is it not awkward, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be awkward for the girl, too. You're going into this knowing that you chose this person and you're just hoping that this person likes you back, because in most cases, they're going to marry you whether or not they find you attractive or find that you have a good personality to them. All of these things, it's just, you know, well, hope this works out.
Yeah. They like went on a hike and it was super awkward. Well, one, I can't imagine like you just have never had an opportunity to go on a date, right? So just like social skills that when you're younger and you go on a date at like 16, at least was the age that I was allowed to start dating, and everybody's awkward and you're figuring out how to date and how to treat a girl, you know, and go to their door or open up their doors. Like there's all these things that you're learning as a teenager by dating. And they don't have any of that. There's still just social aspects to it.
There's a lot to be, and I found this out the hard way, actually, leaving the FLDS church and not being allowed to date at all. And I wasn't married because I left at the age 18. So for me, even having the opportunity to date at all or go on any dates was just a whole new world. And so there were a lot of things that I had to learn. And, some of those things weren't normal things that people would learn, like, hey, the man isn't always in charge and in control of everything. But even still, no matter where you grow up, there's things that you get to experience and learn and progress and make changes and become better at by having those experiences.
Yeah. And so watching them try to go on a hike and just kind of be super awkward. And you're like, this is also their first date with anybody ever. And then, like you said, the impending, no matter what, I'm going to marry this person. So I hope I like them. I hope we get along. I hope everything's good. But even if it isn't, I would be curious to see how many people back out during that courting, or if they feel like because it's inspired of God and the priesthood said yes, can they even back out?
If they handle it similar to the way the FLDS do, you don't really back out. For example, in the FLDS church, if the prophet calls you and says, hey, God inspired us that you're supposed to marry so-and-so, then really you're supposed to just accept it as the word of God and as inspiration. And for the Centennial Park group, if they actually believe that the woman is, 18, the girl is having this inspiration from God, then yeah, how do you back out? Because I know of personal experience, I shouldn't say personal, but I've seen people that I'm really close with be called to get married in the FLDS church, and it didn't seem like they were really that good together at first, but they just said they had to figure it out. This is what God wants, therefore, even if I'm not attracted to that person, I have to learn to be.
Yeah. So we'll see more as they just barely kind of started their courtship of getting to know each other. They have 2 weeks before their wedding, and it's going to be interesting to see. We just barely start seeing the courtship at the end of this episode. So I'm sure we'll see the wedding later and see how that progresses for them.
Or if it even works out.
Because I feel like with the FLDS, because it's coming from a prophet, you trust the prophet's revelation maybe more than what you would just somebody else that you don't know.
Yeah.
Like if a girl says, okay, I received the revelation, maybe that's why they go through the brethren, is to have a confirmation from a priesthood authority that this really valid. Is right and valid. Because I heard of stories when I lived in Utah Valley, people would be like, oh, I felt inspiration that you were supposed to marry me, to girls after a couple dates. And the girls would be like, no.
Yeah.
You can't just feel that inspiration one-sided. I'm not just going to marry you because of that, right? So
inspiration can be scary at times if people just use it to get their way, I guess you could say. I'm not saying that people can't be inspired. I'm just saying that I feel like sometimes in some cases people do take advantage of that, of the whole I'm inspired, therefore this is the way it has to be.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to watch the rest of their courtship and see if they continue to feel like it is inspiration and that it's what they're supposed to do.
Right.
The other big theme, I would say, throughout this one was the Cowley family or Cowley family.
It's I think Cowley is how he kept saying it. Yes.
Okay, and them talking about the financial responsibilities of having so many people in their family, right? So he has 3 wives, 18 children. And they were talking about how 2 of the wives still have infants right now. One of the wives works full-time. He works full-time. And they're not making ends meet. And this is something people ask Sam all the time. Yeah, so I'll just throw this out there. But how do people afford having so many people in a family?
Yes, that is a very tricky one. And kind of what we saw here with the Cowley family was that their oldest was still living at home. They had about 18. And that's about the way it was for me growing up, even though I have more siblings. I have 34 siblings. But it was about 18, 19 people living in the home at one time. So that's similar to the way I was raised as well. We did have 4 mothers in the home. About at the age of 8 or 9 years old is when the 4th mother would join the family. So when I was 8 or 9 years old, not her. So anyway, that's what I'm familiar with too. However, a lot of the older children in my home were young men, young boys that would go out and work as well and bring back some money to help out with the finances at home. So that was helpful. Other than that, we had to be very careful. The way we shopped, we would buy very inexpensive things that would go a long way. For example, rice, chili, potatoes, those kinds of things. We also had a big garden where we would grow our own vegetables and try to eat as much as we could that was homegrown. And so we had to be careful. There weren't any fine meals going around like everybody eating shrimp for dinner. And it wasn't uncommon for us to have homemade bread broken into pieces, sprinkled with honey and some milk as a meal too. Whatever we could do and also keep it very inexpensive, we would.
Yeah, so you see this family as they're going through their budget, trying to figure out what to do, and they do end up deciding that one of the other wives does need to go work a full-time job as well.
Right.
But they'd kind of just started to mention the fact that one wife being left at home, all the wives kind of felt worse for the one staying at home because she's going to be at home with 18 children. Mm-hmm. Granted, I know that the older children help take care, but their oldest is still like 17, 18 years old?
Yes, and she was not working outside of the home, I don't think.
Yeah, so 18 kids, 18 and under. Mm-hmm. No matter how much help you have from older kids, that's a lot of responsibility for one wife to handle, and knowing that they're probably going to have more children and possibly more wives too, you don't know. So watching them struggle and figure out how to make finances work, I feel like was another aspect that people all the time think, how do you make that happen?
Yeah, and I do want to mention as well that at least one or two of the wives in my home growing up were working as well.
Oh yeah, that is.
So there were other ways to bring income. My father's first wife had a college degree and had a really good job, and then at least one of the other mothers were always working as well, bringing in some kind of income. So we did run into that where one or two of the mothers were always in charge of the children at home.
Yeah, and they mentioned, that would be so hard to be at home to begin with that many children, but they talked about how trying to keep a house clean with that many people is like trying to plow snow during a blizzard, right? Yeah. And so just a lot of hard work.
Yeah, and that's something that you would have to talk to my sisters about. My sisters were also very much involved in helping around the house. So that was very common. My older and younger sisters, it was kind of their duty to make sure that things were taken care of at home. Boys at a pretty young age were out working.
And bringing in money
in most cases. So some of the work we didn't really pay much, but we were working at a pretty young age.
Yeah, so it's just a lot of people. It's a lot of people to take care of, and I can not imagine just trying to run that household to begin with.
It would be tough. It is. It's a lot of work, and the more people you have involved, the more they can help out. But at the same time, in these families, there are always a lot of young kids, like toddlers, infants, 2 years old, 3 years old, very young kids that just run around making messes and eating all day, So you have to have a lot of hands helping out. And for us boys, we never were supposed to help with like changing dirty diapers and things like that. For us that did help around the home, it was more helping with some of the cleaning, organizing, some of the laundry sometimes, cleaning the bathrooms. I do remember cleaning bathrooms being a fairly common chore that I was supposed to do because I was the best at it. No, I'm just kidding.
I was going to say, that's why you're so good at it now. I love when you clean the bathrooms.
I don't know that I was any good, but I do have a lot of experience. So I did help clean bathrooms. So us young boys too, we did help around the home, and we would go out and work in the garden a lot and, pulling weeds, watering the plants and things. We also had animals, so we would spend a lot of time working and keeping the pans clean, gathering eggs. So it's not that we didn't help around the home. It just seems like that the women had more to do around the home than the boys did.
More like the stereotypical gender norms, type jobs, right?
Right. That's what it seemed like.
I will say, like, hearing their adults talking at the table, and one thing they say a lot, which kind of always makes me just feel a little bit sad for them. And I know that people living in that situation feel like they're choosing it and that they're happy with it. But a lot of times you hear the words that, like, life's meant to be hard. It takes sacrifices to live like God. It takes sacrifices to live like God wants. And so living a life where money is super, super tight and having a ton of children is the most important thing, even if it's hard to provide for those children or take care of those children, that's where the priority lies. And it's all okay because all of your sacrifices will be worth it in the end.
Right.
And like I said, sometimes that makes me a little bit sad, even though I know it's probably not sad for them. But as an outsider, the idea of your whole life just meaning to be this hard sacrifice.
Yeah, it's not meant to be easy. It's meant to be hard to learn and progress.
And to not really have room for, like, enjoyment, but to just find joy in the work, I guess.
Yeah, and some people, growing up, there were many people that thought that not working was somehow bad. Like, you need to always be working. And that we would often be told that the idle hands is the devil's workshop, or something like that was a term we would hear often. And always be doing something, staying busy. And, you know, and this was, and we weren't allowed to watch TV or listen to most music or play video games, any of that kind of thing. So when they say keep busy, they mean work. Stay busy working. The idea of just being able to try to find enjoyment in life, like, hey, you know what? Let's just try to find the best possible enjoyable life we possibly can for us and our kids. You know, it was very different. I grew up very differently, and I think that a lot of people that grow up on farms can relate, though. Yeah. You know, there's just a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of things that have to be done. It's not that we woke up every morning and we were told, all right, let's see how we can make this day challenging and difficult so that we can pass tests. It was just that's just the way life was for us. You know, there was a lot to be done. We all stayed busy. Yeah. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. As young kids, especially young boys, we definitely found ways to avoid chores at times and to have a good time and run around crazy, getting in trouble, making things that were dangerous, you know. So we did find ways to have a good time. It's not like we had eyes on us forcing us to do things, you know, 24/7. Yeah. The last thing that I thought was really interesting is one of the other husbands and family, they were talking about going to St. George, taking their kids bowling, and kind of just the way that they're perceived. And he said something really interesting. He said, "My religion is not polygamy. I typically say that I'm a Mormon." And I was curious, in the FLDS, did you guys call yourself Mormon? So we didn't call ourselves Mormon, but we thought of ourselves as the true Mormons.
Okay.
Yes. I think everyone that has broken off from the mainstream LDS church along the way would claim to be the true Mormons.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, and it's interesting because the dynamic has shifted, because I grew up with President Hinckley being the prophet of my childhood in the mainstream LDS church. And it was very much like, you should be really proud to be a Mormon. You should be happy to be a Mormon. Then Thomas S. Monson was the next prophet. And we had the I'm a Mormon campaign and the I'm a Mormon movie. And members were encouraged to write letters of how they're normal people, but hashtag I am Mormon, and like spread social media and all this stuff. And then now the most current prophet, Russell M. Nelson, has come out and said that, you know, they don't want anybody to use the word Mormon. You know, it's no longer the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. It's just the Tabernacle Choir. And they want to be called members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Even shortening to LDS, I know isn't preferable, but the full name's a mouthful, right? A way to say it short now, people will say Latter-day Saints for short, or they will say members of the church. You know, and but even that, in his talk, he said even that isn't ideal, right? So sometimes too, when people are referring to Mormons or Mormonism in general, it's important to remember that, like, fundamentalists still call themselves Mormons, and all these different groups and breakoffs might still call themselves Mormons and be proud to be Mormon, even though right now current Latter-day Saints are trying to shy away from that name. There's still a lot of other people that are still proud to have that name as well.
Right.
So it just makes it a little bit tricky.
Within the FLDS church, it was very clear that if someone said the Mormon church, even within the FLDS church, we knew who they were talking. We knew they were talking about the mainstream LDS church. So everybody knows that the mainstream LDS church, even though they don't want to claim it now, they still own the title Mormons. And every breakoff group will agree with that. So it's not that, I don't know that the FLDS church would want to claim that, hey, we're the Mormons, but they would say, if you're referring to the true followers of Joseph Smith and Jesus Christ, the restored church of Jesus Christ on the earth, they would say, that's us. Right?
Yeah.
That they would all claim to be the true church, whether you refer to them as Mormons or not.
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting, him saying from Centennial Park that he calls himself a Mormon because polygamy isn't his religion. That is a part of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ, is polygamy in Centennial Park, or same with the FLDS. That's a part of the restored church, not the church itself. Yeah,
I'm surprised that the Centennial Park group are accepting of the term polygamy, because the FLDS people don't really like that word polygamy. They would rather be called those that practice the celestial law or the eternal law or plural marriage, but not polygamy.
Isn't that more of a newer thing for them as well, though?
It may be.
Because I heard people all the time that had left being like, oh, we called each other plig kids.
See, yeah, so within the church, yes, we would joke about that. And I would see somebody in Walmart that was from the FLDS while I was there, and I would say, what's up, plig? And we would call each other pligs for short. However, I don't think that they appreciated it when an outsider called them that.
Okay.
So you know how that goes for so many different things in life, that it's okay if you're in it to refer to yourself as something, but if someone from the outside is calling you that same name, then it's not okay. And that's kind of the way it was out there as well.
Interesting. Okay, so they wouldn't ever refer to themselves as polygamists.
No, I don't remember ever referring to ourselves as polygamists. Now, I don't remember being offended by it if anyone came to me and said, hey, how many wives do you have? I would just say, oh, about 36, working my way up. I would just joke about it. That was my personality. So it wasn't offensive, I don't think, and I don't think it was for anyone else out there. But if someone from the outside world said, what's up, pligs, walking through Walmart, it would be taken as offensive.
Yeah, you'd be like, who are you?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Interesting. So yeah, the terms and what people feel comfortable being called, and then over time watching that shift too, and seeing what people are now comfortable with or what they have in the past. And then for outsiders, I feel like it's even harder to try to keep up with what people prefer to be called within the different groups too.
Yeah.
Like if they want to be fundamentalists, if they want to be members of the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or if they're okay with FLDS,
It is tough. You don't want to offend people by calling them something that they don't want to be called. That's never the idea, but you have to also admit that people can't keep up with shifts if you're not in it, right?
Yeah.
So I think that people that are in these different groups that want to be called something very specific should also give some grace to those that can't keep up.
Yeah.
just because it's to them it makes perfect sense doesn't mean that the rest of the world is there with you.
Yeah. Well, if you'd like to hear more about what it was like for Sam to grow up in polygamy, please like and subscribe.
Yes, thank you all so much for being here with us again. We look forward to talking with you soon.
Talk to y'all soon.